Welcome, chosen ones. The second you master your silence, curiosity begins to circle you. Because truthfully, people don't examine what they already understand. They study what unsettles them. No one pays this level of attention without cause. They don't rewind your words, observe your pauses, or dissect your actions unless there's something about you that disrupts their sense of normal. And when you no longer respond the way they expect, you become a question they can't stop trying to answer. This isn't simple curiosity. It's the tension of not being able to place you. Because in their version of reality, your path was meant to be predictable, easy to read, easy to explain. But you stepped outside that script without warning, without approval, and that unsettles them. There's an unspoken truth most overlook. People become deeply fixated on what they can't forecast. Not the loud or attention-seeking, but the ones who move quietly, stay grounded, and keep evolving without chaos. The ones who don't perform, yet somehow still progress, that's what keeps them watching. That's the pattern. Attention sharpens around what resists easy definition. It's not about noise. It's about unpredictability. When someone doesn't move in expected ways, they draw focus, they get analyzed, they become something to figure out. And in your everyday reality, you didn't fold when things got heavy. You didn't lose control when life turned unfair. You stayed composed, didn't chase validation, didn't over-explain just to be accepted. And that quiet resilience, that refusal to break character, is exactly what keeps all eyes on you. And that's the moment the fixation takes root. Quietly, almost invisibly, because nothing unsettles people more than someone who endures without putting their pain on display. It disrupts their internal logic. The equation no longer balances. And when the outcome doesn't make sense, they start reworking every step. That's when the observers appear, not supporters, not admirers, but watchers. The ones who catalog your words, track your pauses, and pick up on the smallest shifts. The ones who study you, not because they understand you, but because they can't. The kind who share a smile with you in the moment, then replay everything once you're gone. And the ironic part, they believe it's invisible, but it isn't. What looks composed on the outside is restless beneath the surface. Their attention isn't casual. It's calculated. And the truth that makes it almost amusing is this: you're not putting on a show. You're not stirring chaos or chasing reactions. You're simply moving in your own lane, steady and unaffected. And that alone is enough to keep them watching. No collapse, no spectacle, no narrative they can shrink down to feel above. Just you continuing forward, focused, unbothered, while occupying space in minds that keep trying to figure you out. And that's exactly why this matters. Because the moment you understand why you're being observed like a puzzle under constant light, everything shifts. You stop feeling the weight of their attention and start seeing it clearly for what it is: a reaction to something they can't manage, can't interpret, and can't look away from. Number one, they're not observing you out of admiration. They're trying to make sense of how you endured. In the beginning, you weren't even on their radar like that, and that's important. You weren't labeled as exceptional, dangerous, or worth studying. You were expected to respond like everyone else, bend under pressure, lose momentum, shrink into something easier to predict. The assumption was simple: life would wear you down, quiet you, and keep you within limits they could understand. But when that didn't happen, their attention shifted from indifference to investigation. When that expectation fell apart, something in them shifted. What unsettles them now isn't your achievements or how you carry yourself. It's how you lasted. You faced moments that usually fracture people, leave marks that show, change them in ways they can't hide. But you didn't mirror the damage. You didn't become hardened in the way they expected. You kept your direction, your composure, your sense of self. And that's the part they keep circling back to: the fact that you endured without transforming into the very thing that tried to break you. Endurance without outward damage doesn't register to those who equate strength with volume. So their focus sharpens. They begin noticing your tone, your restraint, the way you choose silence over explanation. Moments get replayed, words get examined, patterns get tracked. Not out of envy, but out of a need to understand. They're not chasing your path. They're searching for the mechanism. Trying to figure out what anchored you when everything around you was meant to pull you apart. There's a quiet reflection happening beneath it all. Your ability to keep going brings up the points where they paused, settled, or lost their footing. Instead of confronting that directly, they turn their attention toward you. Studying you becomes a way to soften the discomfort. If they can label your strength as luck, timing, or some hidden advantage, it gives them distance from the reality they'd rather not face. Because the harder truth is this: endurance isn't something handed out. It's built in silence, through choices made again and again when no one is watching. That's why the energy behind their attention feels so heavy. It's not respect, and it's not competition. It's a quiet tension built from questions they can't settle. You stand as proof that adversity doesn't have to define or destroy. And for someone who leaned on struggle as a reason to stop or shrink, that truth hits deeper than they expect. So they observe you like a result that doesn't align with their beliefs, trying to make sense of something that challenges the story they've been telling themselves, not to imitate it, not to applaud it, but to make sense of it. Because as long as your resilience has no clear explanation, it quietly disrupts the narrative they rely on. It forces them to question why their own outcomes look different, why they chose differently, why they stopped where you didn't. And until they can assign a reason that protects their version of events, your story remains a contradiction they can't fully resolve. Number 2, fixation begins the moment their version of you stops making sense. They had already written your role, a neat, controlled storyline about your limits, your potential, and exactly where you would fall short. It was comfortable, predictable, easy to believe. But when your reality stopped aligning with that script, it didn't just surprise them, it disrupted the entire narrative they built to explain you. In their mind, you were neatly categorized, easy to read, easy to define, easy to contain. You were expected to hit limits, to hesitate, to eventually give in at a moment that confirmed everything they believed. That version of you gave them a sense of control. It let them compare, measure, and feel secure without being challenged. But instead, you shifted that picture, quietly, gradually, yet in a way they couldn't ignore. And once that image cracked, so did the comfort they built around it. You didn't move according to their schedule or their limits. When pressure came, you didn't break. You adjusted. You didn't wait for approval to rise, and you didn't shape yourself just to be accepted. Every assumption they held about you started to fall apart, one by one. And that's where the fixation takes hold. Because when something disrupts their sense of order, the mind tries to restore it, but you didn't fit back into place. You became the exception they couldn't organize, the contradiction they couldn't resolve. They begin picking you apart like a riddle that refuses to resolve. Every move you make, every word you choose, every pause you hold starts to mean something to them. This goes beyond curiosity. It's a need to make sense of what doesn't align. Their version of reality no longer fits, and that tension drives them to look closer. Your steadiness, your control, your quiet progress, all stand out as something unusual. And because they can't easily explain it, they feel almost pulled to keep observing, searching for an answer that never fully appears. Their thoughts loop back to you, replaying moments again and again, searching for a pattern they can finally grasp. They're trying to make sense of something that slipped beyond their expectations, hoping to regain control over a story that no longer holds. This isn't casual attention. It's tension created by not understanding. Your presence disrupts their logic, forcing them to question what they believed about how things work, about what effort should lead to, and about who makes it through and who doesn't. Every move you make gets examined, because it doesn't align with the version of you they created in their minds. This goes beyond simple observation. They're trying to rebuild a sense of reality that keeps their beliefs intact. They need it to make sense without forcing them to admit they misjudged you. And the more grounded and unaffected you stay, the more it intensifies that pull toward you. Because your calm consistency keeps challenging everything they thought was certain. They believed they had your storyline mapped out, but it disappeared the second you chose your own direction. Now their focus isn't really about you. It's about the gap you created in their understanding. They're left trying to piece together a reality that no longer aligns with what they expected. And in that process, their attention becomes less about who you are and more about restoring a sense of certainty they quietly lost. Number 3, you've become living evidence that the reasons they held on to don't hold up. Nothing unsettles people more than seeing their justifications fall apart in real time. For years, they leaned on explanations that made staying the same feel reasonable, blaming timing, environment, other people, or chance. It kept everything comfortable, predictable, and safe. But then, there's you, continuing, advancing, evolving, without needing to justify your path or fit into what they believed was possible. And that contrast quietly exposes what they'd rather not confront. Every move you make quietly reveals how unstable their own narratives really are. The explanations they relied on begin to crack under the weight of your example. That's why their attention stays fixed, because you represent a different outcome they can't ignore. Each step forward, each composed reaction, each boundary you maintain reflects a version of reality they avoided. And in that reflection, they're faced with something uncomfortable. Not who you are, but what they chose not to become. It brings forward the parts of themselves they've kept buried, the strength they could have stepped into, the discipline they could have chosen, the consistency they could have built over time. Without even trying to make a point, your way of moving quietly challenges everything they used to justify staying the same. And that's what makes their focus feel so intense, almost automatic. Because when someone stands as proof against the story we've relied on to protect our ego, it doesn't just create doubt, it unsettles the entire foundation. That tension isn't rooted in envy. It's the strain of holding two conflicting truths at once. They're faced with the realization that what they accepted as boundaries or justifications weren't fixed laws but choices. Your path quietly proves that the limits they believed in weren't absolute. And that realization doesn't settle easily. It pushes them to look closer, think harder, and question more. Because the more undeniable your example becomes, the harder it is for them to maintain the story they once relied on. They start searching for patterns in how you think, how you move, how you choose your moments, anything that might explain the distance between where they are and where you keep going. They dissect your habits, your timing, your decisions, hoping to close that gap in a way that makes sense to them. But observation alone can't replicate what's internal. Because your discipline, your calm, your consistency operate without needing their acknowledgement, and in that, you stand as clear evidence that limitations only hold weight when they're accepted, and you chose not to. Number 4. Their focus shifts to your reactions because they're trying to find your limit. This isn't observation rooted in respect. It's a quiet search for a flaw. They watch closely, waiting for a moment where your control slips, where your calm fractures, where you respond in a way that finally fits what they expected all along. Because if they can pinpoint that breaking point, it restores their sense of certainty. Until then, your consistency keeps them unsettled. What gives their attention its edge is that they don't fully recognize what's driving it. Beneath it all is a quiet discomfort with what they can't predict, a tension around being left behind, and a deeper unease with a reality they can't shape. The idea that someone can face pressure and remain steady unsettles them more than they admit. So they keep watching, revisiting moments, dissecting reactions, hoping to find a crack, a moment of doubt, something that makes you easier to explain. But each time you respond with calm, each time you remain composed, it only sharpens their focus, because you continue to defy what they expected to see. Their focus feels intrusive because it never really turns off. It's deliberate, precise, and always searching beneath the surface. They're not interested in your everyday responses. They're waiting for a slip, a moment of exposure, something that confirms you're as breakable as they expected. It's not just attention. It's fixation shaped by uncertainty, a blend of doubt, discomfort, and the need to fit you back into a version of reality they can understand. Because as long as you remain unexplainable, you challenge the limits they placed on everything, including themselves. What unsettles them most, and quietly intensifies their focus, is how little you give them to work with. There's no dramatic reaction, no obvious weakness, nothing they can point to and say, "There it is." Your strength shows up in consistency, not noise. You don't respond the way they expect, and that absence of reaction becomes its own answer. So they look closer, trying harder, because every moment you remain composed reinforces a truth they struggle to accept, that some people move with a level of control and awareness that can't be shaken, influenced, or forced open. And that's why their focus never lets up. It's not driven by appreciation or genuine respect. It's fueled by the need to confirm a weakness they assume must be there. They keep watching, waiting for a moment that aligns with their expectations, a point where your composure finally gives way. But when that moment never arrives, it doesn't ease their minds. It unsettles them even more. Because every failed attempt to find your limit reinforces the same realization. What they're searching for may not exist, and that only pulls them deeper into trying to prove otherwise. Number 5. Your calm unsettles them in a way confrontation never could. Chaos is familiar territory. They know how to react to raised voices, tension, and emotional displays. But composure leaves them without a script. There's nothing to push against, nothing to escalate, nothing to decode in the usual way. And that absence of reaction creates a kind of tension they don't know how to handle. Because your calm doesn't give them the response they're prepared for. It leaves them facing their own. Those reactions feel predictable, almost manageable. But what unsettles them is your stillness, especially when it holds under pressure. When things intensify and you remain grounded, it disrupts the response they had ready. They expected pushback, not poise. They anticipated reaction, not restraint. And in that moment, your calm takes away the control they thought they had, leaving them without the leverage they were counting on. When someone is trying to provoke you, they depend on emotional reactions to feel in control. Anger gives them resistance, something to engage with. Fear gives them an advantage, something to overpower. But calm offers none of that. It doesn't respond on their terms, doesn't justify itself, and doesn't rush to defend or prove anything. And in that silence, that steady composure, they are left with nothing to work with. And that emptiness creates a deeper unease than any confrontation ever could. They begin to question what's behind your stillness. Composure in tense moments suggests a kind of inner certainty, and that can feel unsettling to those who depend on chaos to keep control. They revisit situations where they expected a reaction, an argument, a defense, a visible crack, and instead found consistency. That quiet steadiness lingers. And over time, it doesn't raise doubts about you. It turns their attention inward, forcing them to question their own assumptions. It forces them to reconsider whether their usual approach has any power at all. And that's when the fixation intensifies. They start observing you more carefully, convinced your calm must be calculated, that there's some hidden strategy behind it. They look for a plan, an edge, and something they can identify and replicate. But what unsettles them most is how simple it really is. You're not engaging with the chaos they rely on. And without that reaction, their tactics have nothing to attach to. And when there's no chaos to engage with, their sense of control begins to slip. Your calm doesn't just neutralize the moment. It exposes it. Without a reaction to hide behind, There's nothing to distract from what actually happened. No escalation to blur responsibility. No emotional noise to shift focus. Just their behavior, clear and unfiltered. And that kind of transparency is uncomfortable because it removes every place they could normally retreat to. So while confrontation might give them a quick sense of resolution, your calm keeps everything unresolved. It extends the tension, leaving them to sit with questions that don't have easy answers. Instead of moving on, they stay stuck, replaying, analyzing, and overinterpreting your every move. And that's what makes your calm powerful. It's not passive. It quietly shifts the dynamic. It breaks their expectations, highlights their uncertainty, and leaves them dealing with the discomfort that no outburst could ever create. Number 6, they fixate on you because what they can't predict, they can't control. Most people rely on patterns and repetition to feel secure. They read behavior, anticipate outcomes, and stay a step ahead in their own minds. But you don't follow that rhythm. Your choices don't line up with their expectations, and your direction doesn't match their calculations. And that lack of predictability unsettles them, because without a pattern to follow, they lose the sense of control they depend on. Your choices don't align with their timing, and your reactions don't match the responses they've already prepared. That disconnect unsettles them. It shifts the ground beneath their expectations in a way they can't easily name, and because of that, their attention sharpens. Every move that breaks their pattern becomes something to analyze, something to figure out, not out of admiration, but out of a need to restore a sense of order that your unpredictability keeps disrupting. When you stay steady under pressure instead of reacting, when your decisions don't follow their logic, yet still lead you forward, when you move without needing approval, it shifts the balance. What they thought they could anticipate or influence starts to slip beyond their reach. There's no clear way to guide, predict, or steer what you're doing. And that absence of control doesn't just confuse them, it unsettles them because it removes the certainty they were relying on. Their focus sharpens because uncertainty unsettles them more than any clear failure ever could. It's not just your unpredictability. It's what it represents. It challenges their sense of control, their belief that everything can be anticipated and managed. So, they observe you closely, trying to find patterns, trying to simplify something that refuses to be reduced. And every time you move in a way they didn't foresee, it forces them to rethink what they thought they understood. Again and again. And that ongoing need to recalibrate keeps the fixation alive. The less they can anticipate your next move, the more effort they pour into tracking, dissecting, and trying to make sense of you. Your unpredictability doesn't just confuse them, it highlights the edges of their own control. They've always seen themselves as logical, structured, in command. But your ability to move freely without rigid patterns reveals something they'd rather not face, that not everything can be contained or controlled the way they believed. And the truth that unsettles them most is that not everyone yields the way they expect. That awareness feels disruptive, even threatening. So their attention stays fixed, not to admire your independence, but to regain a sense of control over something that won't be confined. They watch, recall, and revisit every detail, trying to chart a pattern that simply isn't there. Because the more you move beyond their expectations, the more they're forced to face that some things can't be measured, predicted, or contained. Your unpredictability becomes the quiet force that keeps unsettling them. It's not loud or obvious, but it steadily challenges everything they rely on. It reminds them that real independence can't be tracked, controlled, or reduced through observation. The more aware and self-directed you are, the harder it becomes to define you. And that's what makes you impossible to pin down, because you're not moving within limits they understand.